Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Investor Hotseat. I am your host. This is the show where we ask the tough questions that founders and CEOs need to be prepared to answer. Since this show is about investing, we have our disclaimers. We are not soliciting investment on this episode, and we encourage you all to check out the terms and conditions for these episodes on the psychedelicinvest.com homepage. The agenda for each episode is we'll have a 5-minute presentation from the founder or CEO. Then we'll have 30 minutes of Q&A with myself, and then we'll reserve 5 to 10 minutes for a Q&A from the audience. So if you have any questions whatsoever, you don't need to wait till the end. You can just drop them into the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome George McBride, the co-founder of Clerkenwell. George, you got 5 minutes and you're on the clock.
Thank you very much, Dustin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. As Dustin said, I'm George McBride. I'm co-founder, chief commercial officer here at Clerkenwell Health. Clerkenwell Health is a contract research organization with a specific focus on psychedelic drug development field. And here at Clerkenwell, we believe that existing mental health treatments are not good enough, that there are better treatments for a range of mental health and CNS conditions in various stages of development. And we believe that psychedelics have huge potential and a big part to play in the future, but that these are particularly challenging treatments to develop and commercialize. And that because of that, the way that research has been done traditionally needs to be re-examined and needs to be done slightly different for this field. So what we have built is slightly different to what you would normally see in a traditional contract research organization. We have 3 pillars to the work we do here at Clerkenwell Health. One is our CRO, which is a team of clinical and regulatory experts who design trials on behalf of drug developers, the sponsors of the trials. They, as well as designing those trials, they engage with regulators for approval of those trials and then manage and conduct the research itself. The second pillar are our sites. So normally CROs independently contract sites to conduct the research, and then the CRO's job is purely management of those trials. However, we think this is worthy of changing in this field. Our sites are very important because we have to control other variables while our clients are testing their hypotheses around the set and setting and around a range of other factors in these treatments. Then the third prong of what we do is the therapy. So we train and hire our own therapists. We think that's very important because for a lot of these treatments, the therapy part is a big part of the treatment and needs to be done to certain standards. It needs to be evidence-based and it needs to be rigorous in terms of how it's applied consistently if these treatments are going to be commercially developed and scaled. So we set up Clerkenwell Health because there was an influx of investment into drug developers looking to bring different psychedelic treatments to market. But what we didn't see back in 2019 when we were first planning this venture was capital flowing into the actual picks and shovels businesses that would make these treatments, drug development programs possible. And we didn't see that infrastructure existing already. Sites tend not to have licenses to be able to handle controlled substances, which is a whole issue in of itself. Sites tend not to be geared up for therapy. Sites tend not to be geared up to be a conducive environment for a psychedelic experience. And so we felt there was a need to control that site experience for our trial participants and bring those sites in-house. So we have opened our first clinical trial unit in central London, which has 3 treatment rooms. And we are opening a number more of those clinical trial units, first across the UK, then Europe and internationally. so that we can conduct research in those sites and we can adhere to the highest standards and deliver this research on a commercial scale. Previously, this research has tended to be done out of small rooms in psychiatric wards at university hospitals and phase 1 units that are set up more for, sleep trials and vaccine trials and all sorts of other work. So we think that building from the ground up an organization that can partner with sponsors to do this research thoroughly and properly is really what's needed in the space right now. And that's why we've built it. And we've spent the last 2.5 or so years getting it funded, building the team, getting all of the license and regulatory compliance in place. And now we are at the exciting point, and we are now conducting research on behalf of clients and looking to grow and scale our business over the next few years.
Perfect timing. You nailed it. Thank you so much for the work you do. You guys are certainly filling a void in the industry. And you talked about a little bit about the reasons why you guys founded Clerkenwell, but I'd like to dig a little bit more into the why of yourself. Why did you personally get into the industry, and how did that lead you to eventually founding Clerkenwell?
I think, thanks for the question, Dustin. Like a lot of people in this field, I have my own personal experiences. I have, mental health problems in my immediate family, and I've seen the difficulty of receiving appropriate mental health care. And I've seen the way in which psychoactive compounds have been maligned and misunderstood and not properly utilized in mental health care. And so I used to be a commercial barrister, a lawyer, a litigator, but I saw a really exciting role back in 2015 working for Amanda Fielding at the Beckley Foundation, which has obviously been one of the leaders of driving research in this area for decades. And so I jumped at that opportunity and went to go and work for Amanda, which is where I met our chief scientific officer, Dr. Henry Fisher, who was just finishing his PhD at Oxford. And then we worked together and built a team and went on to campaign for medical cannabis legalization here in the UK and built a number of ventures in the cannabis space together. And then the co-founding team who built Clerkenwell have been working together for between 5 to 7, 8 years now. So we've worked across a range of different psychoactive drug ventures, both not-for-profit and profit-making ventures. But what really drove us to build Clerkenwell was in 2019, after we'd sold Cannabis Europa, a conference business that we built. Like I said in my intro, we just didn't see the money going to the places that it was needed in order to actually do this research. And what we wanted was to put patient centricity at the heart and access. And it was very clear that access in the short, medium, potentially long term in the UK was only going to be through clinical trials. And that if these products were ever going to become more widely available this side of the Atlantic, that clinical research needed to be done by the right people with the right rigor, and that it was going to be very difficult and much more difficult than research normally is for just a single drug compound that you'd be pushing through drug development.
Got it. And yeah, I didn't realize that you worked with Amanda earlier. We're, our investment fund, we're huge supporters of the Beckley Foundation. We also invested in Amanda's biotech company, Beckley Psytech. We also invested in Beckley Retreat. So they've done absolutely incredible work. So they're a great group to work with. So kind of using Beckley Psytech as an example, since they're on the drug development side, some of our viewers might not understand what a CRO is. They understand drug development companies like Beckley Psytech that are developing drugs. But maybe you could give a little bit more detail on just what is a CRO in general with respect to a drug development company like Beckley Psytech. How do you guys partner with them? And then I guess you could also add in how you guys are different from kind of the general CROs.
Yeah, wonderful. So normally, pharmaceutical drug development is highly stratified. So you have very niche businesses doing all sorts of different activities in what is a very complicated, long and highly regulated process. So people who discover a drug or a treatment themselves very rarely are the ones who actually conduct the research on it. What they will do is outsource all of that work to various different expert organizations who will work as contract researchers on behalf of the company that owns the IP and the drug. So traditionally, what a sponsor, a drug developer would do is hire one main contract research organization, CRO, that takes the risk, responsibility, and management of their research, and then contracts out various aspects of it to different independent companies. So that's independent research sites, independent labs, independent clinicians, and brings them in and manages it for the drug developer. So essentially the drug developer can focus on what they're good at, which is discovering the compounds, protecting the IP, developing the regulatory strategy, and fundraising. So that's already quite a lot on their plate. And managing very complex projects, which are highly regulated with a huge number of different people having to be involved, is something that is almost always better outsourced than kept in. And I suppose, like, just kind of reiterating some of what I said on the introduction of why this needs to be done differently, is those CROs are not used to this kind of treatment. There are a whole range of different issues trying to bring a psychedelic drug to market. It's difficult to blind, because obviously it's very obvious if somebody's under the influence of a psychedelic drug at a high dose, usually. So that means it's very difficult to discern the data in efficacy. There are safety issues that are different to existing drugs because it's psychoactive, and there are different kind of safety profile risks with risk profiles with these compounds. And also, like I said, setting, most people are aware, is an important part of this. The mindset that the person comes into the experience with, how that is created through the preparation for the dosing session, and then how it's maximized in the integration afterwards. And also the importance of having a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist on hand during that experience. So these are all things that traditional contract research organizations aren't very used to. And to be frank, they probably could do it well if they wanted to, but at the early stages, a lot of these trials were being conducted are quite small. So they're highly complex and not necessarily of the same kind of value to those organizations as the big, oncology multinational trials that they're used to running for hundreds of millions of dollars. So we didn't really see the will from a lot of the existing players in the market to do the hard work, to be prepared to run these trials. A lot of them wanted to win the contracts, but we saw really low fidelity from the sponsors to their contract research organizations. We saw a lot of sites that failed to recruit patients, very variable data being produced by different sites, very long timelines on getting all the approvals for moving controlled substances. So there are all of these factors. It's not any one single thing. It's the whole range of complexity there is in this research field.
Yeah, and you mentioned that a lot of the bigger CROs in other fields, they contract out with independent sites, and I'd imagine if you ask them why they don't have their own sites, they'd say similar to the drug development companies that have a lot of work to do. You need a CRO to manage this specific process. Similar to that, the CRO has a lot of work to do, so they can't get involved too much in the actual site work that's being done. But you guys have actually decided to have sites as well. So could you tell me a little bit more on why you decided, number one, why you decided to have those sites? Number two, do you also contract with other independent sites? And then number three, just why you really thought it was important to have those sites?
Yeah, so we've definitely, taken quite a difficult road. It's not easy to do the three different things we're doing in tandem: the therapy, the sites, and the CRO. But the main reason we had to build those sites is because we really didn't see that they existed. We looked at all of the different sites with Schedule 1 compounds in the UK and elsewhere, and we saw that most of them had significant issues around resourcing. A lot of them were located at universities who obviously want to do their own research and aren't geared up to commercial research. And then a lot of the sites that had the Schedule 1 license that were private sites, you're talking big phase 1 units with maybe 160, 180 beds. a lot of these places are noisy and busy. There's a lot going on. We didn't think that they were a very good environment in which to have a psychedelic experience, essentially, or, you know, in a small back room on a psychiatric hospital, or in a big unit full of people undergoing vaccination trials and cancer trials and all sorts of other stuff going on. So if we'd have seen that they were out there, we probably would have avoided having to go and build them ourselves, but we really didn't think that it was there. And we think that our unit in London really is a first of its kind, at least in this part of the world. I think hopefully that will change as people see the need for these and the commercial opportunity in developing them. But we are going to grow those ourselves. But to your point, will we contract other sites? Yes, if they meet all of our standards. So we haven't done that to date, but that's not to say that there aren't sites internationally that definitely would meet our standards now, that I think there are. And we're very pragmatic and flexible in how we deliver to our clients' objectives. That's one of the main differentiators from the existing CROs, is we're not like a cookie cutter factory. We don't just do it the exact same way every way. And we also believe that the real route to success in drug development here is collaboration. So we're very much a partner with our clients and not just a vendor. So if they need us to go and contract a site in Australia or the US or wherever it may be, we will do that if it's the best way to achieve their goals. And building out those sites is not at all easy. The security infrastructure is expensive. The quality management system for our site took over 18 months to build, and you're talking, you know, tens of thousands of pages of regulatory compliance materials and a number of highly niche experts in their field working to conduct the research on those sites. So you can see why people don't do it. There's a huge degree of execution risk. It's quite capital intensive. It's labor intensive. You can see why investors in the early stage wanted to bet on drug developers and not into this really quite difficult area. But we really felt that without doing this, the rest of it looked unlikely to succeed.
And so just fast forwarding like 3 to 5 years from now, do you guys expect that your growth will be, you know, more contracting with independent sites, or do you think your growth will be more focused on, you know, adding your own sites across the country or across the world?
Yeah, I think that's where the key is geographically. We're intending to grow organically through our own proprietary sites in our region. So at first UK and Ireland, and then Europe. We don't plan at the moment on building our own sites in places like Australia or the US or further afield. I think we're better off partnering in those fields. But it's also important to think, if you're looking at 3 to 5 years out, what we'll be doing, we'll still definitely be doing a lot of research, and that'll be the core part of the business. And we think there are a few more waves of these treatments coming through development. But also where this is different from traditional research is normally the CRO, the endpoint is marketing authorization, the product being approved. But in this field, you need sites then to commercialize your treatment. You need those sites available to do it. So we're planning on continuing to open sites to meet the demand in the market. And then as and when products get approval, those sites can become sites for people to receive treatment outside of clinical trials as well. But we were a little bit cautious on that. We didn't see a big opportunity in rolling out clinics for ketamine therapy or anything like that. We felt that the opportunity was very much research in the short to medium time, but the infrastructure that we built there would go on to be useful in the long term for clinic chains for treatment.
Got it. And just kind of moving on to kind of talking a little bit more about your clients, and I'm going to ask a few questions here that might be a little bit proprietary, so feel free to just let me know if I'm getting into any dangerous territories. But it would be good to understand, like, how many clients have you guys already contracted with? How many drug development companies are you working with? And if you would maybe give an example of like a success story of you know, one particular client you were able to work with and what you were able to achieve for them.
Yeah, wonderful. So we've worked with 14 clients to date. The vast majority of those I can't talk about, so I can't get into all of that. Because our site literally opened this week for actually doing treatment. So what we've been doing over the last 2 years has been the protocol development, scientific and regulatory advice, more consulting services. Where we've started to see real excitement recently is helping right from the beginning with a number of developers where they've got their compound, they've completed some preclinicals, and that they've got a fairly robust idea of what their ultimate desired endpoint is. And then they bring us in to actually fully design the protocol. So that's all of the regulatory materials to submit to a regulator to get a trial approved. And then engaging that regulator and working collaboratively with them through some of these difficult issues like blinding and safety and security. And so we've really enjoyed working with some clients on the full protocol development. Mindset is one which we've worked with recently, and they're interesting because they are not trying to, they're not aiming to run huge phase 3s. What they're trying to do is identify lead compounds, put together safety and efficacy data, and then build an attractive package that they can then sell or license on to well-funded, larger pharmaceutical companies who can run that big, expensive development that could run into the billions of dollars in the later phases. And we think that companies like that have a really clear niche role to play in the market are really nice companies to work with. I think everyone will know there were quite a few companies in the early stages who were trying to do everything. And trying to do everything in this field means you need like Pfizer level budgets, and that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and so I want to understand the capacity a little bit better. So, obviously, if you're just a general CRO contracting with independent sites, you just need to hire more people and build the systems, and you kind of scale. When you're dealing with a physical site, you're somewhat limited in the capacity you could take on with respect to that site. So how many clients realistically could you take on at a given site in a given year?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and it requires a lot of hard work to plan the resource and the capacity at the site. But we've got 5 studies launching at our site between now and the early summer, and we're expecting that our site will then be at capacity in late summer, and that'll probably be with 6 concurrent trials running in the site. We have 3 treatment rooms. We try and push dosing days to be Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, because there's all sorts of other activities that have to happen on the site that could interfere with the experience of the people undergoing dosing days. So basically, we've got 3 rooms, 3 days a week that can do dosing sessions. If you're running a DMT trial with a short duration of experience, you might be able to do 2 or even 3 dosings in a day. But obviously with a compound like LSD, you may well have to have people staying overnight, and it may end up being a 2-day process to have them coming in. So we have to work really closely with clients to plan capacity. And we've just had to do another fundraise to open our 2nd site. And now we have to do that quick sharp because we waited until we knew when we were going to be at capacity for the site to go and expedite the plans to launch the 2nd site. So hopefully that will be launching just as we reach capacity at the 1st site. But that's a difficult thing to try and dovetail.
Got it. And yeah, you mentioned the overnight thing. I was actually surprised. I was at our portfolio company, Awaken, their clinic in Bristol, not too far from you guys. And they actually had an overnight room that they had there really in preparation for MDMA and some of these longer acting psychedelics, since if someone's doing a 10 to 12 hour treatment, they may want to stay overnight. Do you guys actually have at your site those types of facilities, or would you be sending them home?
We nearly all the trials that we're running involve sending them home. We can facilitate 1 night overstays at our current site, but our 2nd site, which we're opening in London, like I said, sort of Q3, that is going to have a lot more space because some of these trials with novel compounds have to have people staying multiple nights, 7 or 14 nights, because they're having their tests run regularly to ensure that the treatment was safe. And in those areas, we need to have, a little gym, a recreation area, a kitchen, places for them to stay with ensuite WC facilities. So that's what our second site will look like. The first site is more geared up to phase 2 trials. So trials in which the compound has already been to a certain degree deemed safe, and that it's okay for the participant to come in, take the drug, and then leave on the same day. Our second unit in London will be much more geared up to run phase 1, 2, and 3. So it'll be larger, there'll be a lot more space, and trial participants will be sometimes staying anywhere up to sort of 14 nights in there.
Got it. And so you mentioned that, a couple of years ago when you guys got involved back in 2019, there was really, since then, there was an explosion of psychedelic companies, specifically biotech companies in the psychedelic space starting. And since then, there's been certain macroeconomic factors that has certainly made it very challenging for some of these drug development companies to raise the capital needed to hire CROs like you and really push their trials forward. So we'd love to hear from you. I know it's just definitely impacted our fund. I think the whole industry is getting impacted, whether you're in drug development or you're doing the picks and shovels for drug development. You're definitely feeling the effect of kind of capital being more scarce right now. So interested on hearing how that's affected Clerkenwell and what your forecasts are as far as, what's going to happen with some of these drug development companies that are clients of yours or prospective clients of yours.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we were anticipating a crash. I think it's come faster and deeper than we were anticipating in terms of the public market conditions for these biotechs. It definitely will have an impact on our business. The liquidity of our clients is clearly a material risk to the business, but we also have to take faith in the fact that there are some larger publicly listed companies who have at least 3 years runway, who we think will easily move past these temporary market conditions. There are other, like you mentioned, Beckley, Psychedelic, who are well-funded private organizations, again, with considerable runway. And also, there's been a huge wider boom in other mental health research. It's not all psychedelic. So I think one of our mitigating strategies is to move earlier into a wider range of treatments, because what we're doing is the psychedelics is very much the tip of the spear, but our mission and our vision is focused around better mental health treatments and conducting mental health research better. It is not exclusively psychedelic. So there is a wider pool of clients we can draw on. And then some of the other stuff going in the market, being a bit cynical and self-interested, is kind of good for us. If clinic chains are folding or retreats are folding, it's just increasing the scarcity of sites like ours and teams like ours, and that makes what we're building even more valuable. So what we've built is a revenue generating organization that we're expecting to be profitable by the end of the year. So we just have to tailor our growth strategy to the demand in the market. And we should be fine to weather these volatilities. Obviously, we would like to grow faster. We would like these drugs to come to market faster. So the sooner that market conditions can improve, the better. But we're hoping that we're in a strong position. We did this strategy very much with this in mind. We were expecting this to happen, and we were expecting a very high attrition rate of small biotechs in this space. And I think we will see that the majority will fail, and businesses are obviously failing already. And, you need really considerable funds to execute on plans like this. And not everyone's geared up to raise that kind of capital.
Yeah, so throughout this session, you've mentioned a few times some different challenges and risks with respect to your CRO model. You just mentioned, liquidity of your clients is one risk. You've also mentioned, getting Schedule 1 and some of the other regulatory aspects of what you're doing. So what are kind of like the top 3 risks and challenges that you guys are facing today?
Market conditions, liquidity of clients is number one. Like it has to be, if people can't pay for our services, we can't run our business. We're a service provision business. So that's miles out in front. The regulatory risks, they're actually really barriers to entry and benefits for us. They're things where we've turned risks into benefits, because the harder it is to run this research, the more the rationale holds true that you need niche focused organizations working on this. So that's actually really a benefit. Obviously, the risk that execution risk on doing any of this improperly, if we were to ever hire the wrong people, conduct things improperly, regulators would come down on us like a ton of bricks. But that is all just driving us to be more and more and more focused on quality and compliance. So that helps us be better at our jobs, high regulatory burden. I think the other issue is just the sheer difficulty of bringing these kind of treatments to market, in terms of none of the front runners have a clear vision of how they're going to commercialize these post-treatment. And until that happens, it's very difficult to see existing well-funded large pharmacos moving into the space. And we really feel that does have to happen at some point in order to facilitate like a big global rollout of these treatments and not just kind of regional reforms and small niche products coming to market. So I think that's a big risk too, is whether or not someone can get together a clear plan that demonstrates the commercial viability of these treatments.
Got it. And so I just have a few more questions and then we're going to go to audience questions. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to drop them in right now. We're going to get to them in just a few minutes. So I want to dive into another somewhat confidential area. So feel free to answer to the extent you can. So from a financial perspective, you mentioned that your plan is to break even within, the next 12 months. That's incredible. A lot of companies just in general outside the psychedelic space breaking even this early on, that would be an incredible accomplishment. And in particular in the psychedelic industry, to be a profit generating business would be even more impressive. So if you could share maybe what some of the assumptions are in order for you guys to get to break even, like, how many clients you need to bring on board, what needs to happen in order for you guys to be successful in kind of reaching that goal, to the extent you could share.
Okay, so I won't share like our actual forecasts, margins, historic revenues, but I'll talk a little bit about our service offering and kind of what we need to deliver. So a small site project, we get paid on footfall through the site when we operate as a site. So we might get anywhere between 15 and 30,000 per patient coming through the site, depending on the complexity of the trial and how much labor and everything else is involved. So we need to get a lot of footfall through that site, and it needs to be operated efficiently in order for us to become a profitable business. On the CRO side, the margins are higher, the contract values are higher, and what we really need to do is just win the work. So from running a small phase 2 study on behalf of a client might generate us somewhere between sort of 1 and 2.5 million in revenues. And that we only need to win a couple of those. So just to give you some context, we've raised 2.5 million pounds sterling to date, and we have over 750,000 committed to our current round, which will probably close at about 1 million in the next week or two. So we'll have raised 3.5 million sterling, so about just shy of $4 million. And I can easily see us booking that much revenue over the next 6 months if the business goes well, in terms of signing a couple of CRO projects and a bunch of site projects. But my financial director will kill me if I go into the depths of, and I think he'd be right to. So we've deliberately remained private. We're not secretive. We try and be as open as collaborative about our strategy and the market as we can, but also as reserved as possible about the work that we do for our clients, where they want to keep that quiet, and our own internal, revenues, margins, etc.
Totally understandable. And so just kind of last question, just to wrap up, milestones in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months. What could we be expecting out of Clerkenwell in those time periods?
Over the next 6 months, we should have commenced, 5+ studies at our site. We hopefully will have concluded one of our studies within 6 months, but we won't then, be seeing data from that yet. 12 months out, you start to see the data that our site and our CRO is generating when we start to get into academic publications and everything, which gets really exciting. And 6 months, so I'm just jumping around a bit, but within 6 months, we should have our second site open, the phase 1 capable unit, which will be larger and have more service offering than our existing site. And then 12 months out, we should have a fairly robust international network of both partner and Clerkenwell owned sites. So like I said, that's geographic dependent. And then within 18 months, what is starting to get exciting is we're starting to move towards where you might actually see marketing authorization for MDMA. And that's unknowable, and a lot of other companies have gone out and said things that were a bit too bolshy, so I don't want to second guess when or if the FDA will approve MDMA. But what we do know is that the MHRA here in the UK, the regulator, has changed its rules so that if a product gets approved by the FDA, that will automatically be approved here in the UK. And what that means is if and when MDMA is approved by the FDA, that will become available on private prescription here in the UK. It will be a number of years before we'd likely to see that happening with the NHS, but we would then be able to be moving into that space in terms of treatment provision outside of clinical trials. So that's the kind of horizon. You'll see us grow over the next 6 months. 12 months, we start to generate a lot of scientific data, and 18 months, we might be able to be either just about to or have actually moved into a new service line.
Got it. Yeah, I think the whole industry is kind of holding on tight to see what happens with MDMA. So we're all very excited, and I know we all are behind MAPS and wish them the best in getting that through sooner than later. Great. Well, we're done with our questions. We're going to jump to the audience questions. We only have so far one question, so if anyone has any questions, make sure to drop them in the chat box. We will go to our first question. So, do you think there is a lack of visibility of psychedelic clinical trials? I think this is a big factor affecting patient liquidity. I'm not sure how to interpret that question, but maybe you have a better idea of what she's getting at there.
Is there a lack of visibility? So there have been a number of organizations who've tried to drive awareness of psychedelic trials. So there are a few different kind of maps and databases online that you can find that will try and direct you towards, and I hope I'm answering the question right here. There are a few different resources that will direct people towards clinical trials that are running. Clinical trials are very transparent in a certain way in terms of they have to be posted. It has to be shown somewhere once those trials are approved on the relevant government websites that they're happening. But then there is also this other question of why, when there are places where it's clear to find these trials are happening, do the drug developers struggle so much to recruit people onto the trials, and why there's so many patients dying for an innovative treatment struggle to find access to come and participate. And that's part of what we're trying to fix here at Clerkenwell. And again, it's hard because there are demanding eligibility criteria for participants in trials that often people get excluded from trials that they think they would be eligible for. And often it's very difficult because you're nowhere near the trial that's going on, or the timings don't work out. But I think it's fairly transparent. But then obviously certain aspects of this, what people are doing is spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on developing things, and certain aspects of it obviously are very opaque. People do not just post everything that they're doing all over the internet. That's not how this works. This isn't being open sourced. It's not being everyone chipping in and trying to do this. It's very much there are a bunch of different commercial organizations who are in their lanes now and who have got their own IP and have their own guard up to a certain degree. But we're going to be making a lot of noise about a lot of the trials that we're running on socials, through different clinics, through different patient groups and charities and third sector organizations. So that's one of the big roles that we have, is trying to bring together the patients in need to the needs of the sponsor. And it's not an easy challenge, but we're doing our best to try and fix it.
Yeah, I know it's funny. We have a trial site here I live in Fort Lauderdale. It's right in Pompano, not too far away. It's called Siegel Trials, and they have I think 4 to 6 psychedelic clinical trials going on. I would say they're probably one of the more active sites in the country and probably in the world. And people are always surprised. People are always asking me, how could I get involved in these clinical trials? I'm like, there's actually a trial going on right down the street. I think there's 2 issues there. I think number one is it's marketing dollars, right? Like, these trial sites need to be able to recruit patients and the CROs, right? So, I know that Siegel Trials, for example, I see some of their ads, but they only have so big of a marketing budget they could spend on it. And then I think the second is also there's a lot of exclusionary stuff for a lot of these. For example, people on SSRIs for some of these trials can't get on. Well, guess what? Most people with treatment-resistant depression or major depressive disorder are on SSRIs and are not willing to get off of them. So I think those are 2 of the challenges. And just what we've actually done, our sister site to psychedelicinvest.com, Newly.com, NEULY.com, actually aggregates all the psychedelic clinical trials and the clinical trial sites. We probably haven't done a good job of marketing that feature ourselves. But that data is there and it is available. And, I think we need to do a better job of marketing it ourselves. But I think those are 2 of the bigger issues, is just marketing dollars and some of these exclusionary items that some of these trials have. Curious if you agree on I think hopefully we'll see some of these exclusionary items drop off as there's trials, for example, demonstrating that SSRIs and psychedelics are not in contrast to one another. But I'm curious to hear if you've started to see any kind of movement on some of these exclusionary aspects.
Not enough, in my view, because I think, I was saying about whether or not big pharma sees value and commercialization potential in these treatments. One problem we've got there is a lot of the data so far is on quite homogeneous, unrepresentative samples of quite large heterogeneous cohorts. And apologies if my language is getting too scientific. I'm not a scientist. But the issue we've got is, for instance, treatment-resistant depression, very, very common condition for people to have, but very, very rare for people to have it without being on multiple different drugs, or having other comorbidities, or having family histories of psychosis, or having a reason why they can't participate in a trial that's 12 different sessions. There are a lot of barriers for the patients to get on the trials. And what you end up with is data that shows you how these work on people who are depressed, have tried at least 2 different treatments, but don't have any other sick illnesses, are able to engage with a clinic. So they're quite hard trials to recruit for. And like you say, we really, really need to find ways to safely widen out the participants, so that we're actually testing these on a representative sample of people and not quite unrepresentative samples, which some of the research to date has been.
Absolutely. And it looks like we have no more questions. So we're going to wrap it up. So congratulations. You survived the hot seat. Really appreciate you being here, George. And, we'll be looking forward to having you back on the show to kind of get an update on where you guys are at in the next 6 to 12 months. But thank you so much for being here. You did a great job answering questions and presenting.
Thank you very much, Dustin. It was absolutely my pleasure. So I'd be happy to come back whenever. And thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Have a great one. Hope everyone has a great evening.